My brother always thought he was better than me. Smarter, stronger, more successful. He loved reminding me that I'd never amount to anything because of my condition. What he didn't know was that I owned the building he'd been bragging about living in for the past 3 years. The same building where he threw parties every weekend, talking about how his rich landlord would never catch him breaking the lease rules. Well, Marcus was about to meet his landlord face to face. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Growing up with cerebral palsy in the small town of Millfield, Ohio, I learned early that people would always underestimate me. My name is Sarah Chen, and while my left leg doesn't work quite right and my speech sometimes slurs when I'm tired, my mind has always been sharp as a razor. My older brother Marcus never seemed to understand this distinction. Marcus was 3 years older, captain of the high school football team, and everything came easy to him. While I spent hours in physical therapy and speech coaching, he was collecting scholarships and accolades. Our parents, David and Linda Chen, tried their best to treat us equally, but I could see the pride in their eyes whenever Marcus brought home another trophy or college acceptance letter. The worst part wasn't the disability itself, it was Marcus's constant commentary about it. During family dinners, he'd make jokes about my robot walk or imitate my speech when I got excited about something. When I struggled to keep up during family hikes, he'd dramatically slow down and say things like, "Don't worry, Sarah, we'll wait for you to catch up. Take all the time you need." The fake concern in his voice was worse than outright cruelty. "She's doing her best," Mom would say weakly, but she never actually told him to stop. By the time I graduated high school, Marcus was already finishing his business degree at Ohio State. He'd secured a job at a marketing firm in Columbus and constantly talked about his bright future in corporate America. Meanwhile, everyone assumed I'd end up on disability benefits, maybe working part-time at some understanding local business. That assumption lit a fire in me that never went out. While Marcus partied through college, I buried myself in computer programming courses at the local community college. My high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, had noticed my aptitude for logic puzzles and suggested coding might suit me. She was right. The digital world didn't care about my limp or occasional speech difficulties. Code was pure logic, and logic was something I understood better than most people. I spent every free moment learning new programming languages, building websites, and taking on small freelance projects. While other students were at parties, I was in my dorm room at night, the blue glow of my laptop screen illuminating my determined face as I solved complex coding problems. My disability actually became an advantage in some ways. I was incredibly focused, patient, and detail-oriented because I'd spent my whole life having to work twice as hard to achieve half the recognition. By the time I finished my associate degree, I had a portfolio that impressed even seasoned developers. I landed a junior developer position at a tech startup in Columbus, the same city where Marcus was climbing the corporate ladder at his marketing firm. Marcus found this hilarious. During a family Christmas dinner, he regaled everyone with stories about his latest promotion and company car, then turned to me with that familiar, condescending smile. "And Sarah's still playing around with computers," he announced to the table. "It's cute, really, like a hobby that pays a little bit. Though I guess every family needs someone to handle the technical stuff, right?" Uncle Robert laughed along, not knowing any better. "Well, at least she found something she can do from home. Very practical." I bit my tongue and smiled politely, but inside, I was already planning my next move. The tech startup where I worked was developing a revolutionary property management software, and I was the lead programmer on the project. The CEO, Janet Morrison, had noticed my exceptional work and started giving me more responsibilities. When she discovered I had a natural understanding of real estate databases and tenant management systems, she offered me a unique opportunity. "Sarah, I've been thinking," Janet said during one of our weekly meetings. "You understand this software better than anyone, and you've got a head for the business side too. How would you feel about becoming our real estate technology consultant? We've got clients who need someone who can bridge the gap between the technical and property management sides. This role opened doors I never expected. I started working directly with property owners, helping them streamline their operations through technology. I learned about cash flow, property valuation, market analysis, and investment strategies. More importantly, I started saving every penny I earned. While Marcus was spending his income on expensive dinners, designer clothes, and a flashy apartment in Columbus's trendy Short North district, I was living modestly and investing wisely. I rented a small but comfortable place on the outskirts of the city, drove a reliable used Honda, and put most of my income into a carefully managed portfolio of index funds and real estate investment trusts. Marcus, meanwhile, had moved into what he considered the pinnacle of urban living, a luxury apartment building called the Metropolitan Towers on High Street. He'd gotten the unit through some connection at his marketing firm. The building was known for being exclusive and expensive, with a waiting list for most units. Every family gathering became an opportunity for Marcus to brag about his sophisticated lifestyle. He'd show photos of his apartment's floor-to-ceiling windows, the rooftop terrace with city views, and the building's amenities like the fitness center and concierge service. "You should see the networking events they host," he told Dad during one visit. "I'm rubbing shoulders with some of the most successful people in Columbus. My landlord must be incredibly wealthy. This building is definitely an investment property for someone with serious money." He'd always end these conversations by glancing at me with that same patronizing expression. "Maybe someday Sarah can afford a place in a building like this, though I suppose she'd need the elevator to work properly." He'd laugh at his own joke while I sat there, my hands clenched under the dinner table. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd been quietly building my own real estate empire. It started small, a duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood that I purchased with a combination of saved income and a small business loan. I lived in one unit and rented out the other, using the rental income to pay down the mortgage faster than scheduled. The property management software I'd helped develop gave me insights into the Columbus rental market that most investors didn't have. I could analyze vacancy rates, rental price trends, and tenant demographics with surgical precision. Within 2 years, I'd purchased 3 more properties, each one carefully selected based on data that predicted strong appreciation and rental demand. But my biggest acquisition was still ahead of me. Through my work consulting with property owners, I'd learned that the Metropolitan Towers was quietly going up for sale. The current owner, an elderly investor named William Harrison, was looking to liquidate his Columbus properties and move to Florida. The asking price was steep, $4.2 million, but the building was profitable and well located. More importantly, I knew exactly what the building could generate in revenue because I'd helped Mr. Harrison optimize his property management systems the previous year. The numbers were solid, and with some strategic improvements, the building could be even more profitable. I'd been saving and investing for 5 years at this point, and my portfolio had grown substantially. Between my liquid investments, the equity in my other properties, and a commercial real estate loan, I had enough to make a competitive offer. The negotiation took 3 months. Mr. Harrison was impressed by my technical knowledge of the building's systems and my detailed business plan for improvements. When he discovered I was only 26 years old, he was even more intrigued. "You remind me of myself at your age," he said during our final meeting, "focused, determined, and willing to work while others are playing. This building will be in good hands." On a cold February morning, I signed the papers that made me the owner of the Metropolitan Towers. Marcus's exclusive luxury building, the symbol of his success and superiority, now belonged to his disabled little sister, who he thought would never amount to anything. The irony was delicious, but I wasn't ready to reveal it yet. I wanted to observe first, to see just how far Marcus would take his arrogance before I pulled back the curtain. Through the property management company that handled day-to-day operations, I learned that Marcus had been pushing boundaries for months. Unauthorized parties, complaints from neighbors, and several violations of his lease agreement that the previous owner had largely ignored. It was time for a new management approach. My first week as owner of the Metropolitan Towers was eye-opening.
The property management company, Henderson and Associates, had been running the building with a hands-off approach that bordered on negligence. Lease violations were documented but rarely enforced, maintenance requests sat in queues for weeks, and several tenants had been getting away with behavior that would have gotten them evicted from most other properties. Marcus's file was particularly thick. In the past 6 months alone, there were noise complaints from 3 different neighbors, reports of unauthorized overnight guests exceeding the lease limit, evidence of subletting his spare bedroom without permission, and photographs of damage to the common area after one of his parties. The previous owner, Mr. Harrison, had apparently been content to collect rent and ignore problems as long as they didn't affect his bottom line. I scheduled a meeting with Patricia Henderson, the lead property manager, to discuss implementing new policies. The building has been profitable, Patricia explained, spreading the financial reports across her desk. But we could definitely tighten things up. Some tenants have been taking advantage of the relaxed enforcement. Unit 412, for instance, she pulled out Marcus's file, has been pushing boundaries for months. I kept my expression neutral as she detailed my brother's violations. What would you typically do in a situation like this? Under the new ownership structure you're proposing, we'd start with formal written warnings for all existing violations, then implement a 3-strike policy going forward. Most tenants shape up quickly once they realize management is serious about enforcement. Let's start with that approach, I agreed, but I'd like to review all warning letters before they go out. I want to make sure we're being fair but firm. Patricia nodded approvingly. Some of these tenants have been here long enough to think they own the place. A reality check will be good for everyone. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into understanding every aspect of the building's operations. I walked through all 12 floors, noting maintenance needs and opportunities for improvement. The building was solid, but needed updates. New security cameras for the lobby, upgraded lighting in the parking garage, and a complete overhaul of the laundry facilities in the basement.
A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I also started receiving the daily incident reports that Patricia generated. Marcus appeared in them with alarming frequency. Tuesday, loud music until 2 a.m., multiple neighbor complaints. Thursday, found smoking in the stairwell, which violated both his lease and city fire codes. Saturday, hosted a party with an estimated 40 people in a unit designed for occupancy limits of 8. Each report made me more determined to address the situation properly. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. He was affecting other tenants' quality of life and potentially creating liability issues for the building. The formal warning letter went out on a Wednesday. Patricia crafted it professionally, citing specific lease violations and dates, with clear consequences if the behavior continued. I approved it with one small addition. All future correspondence would be copied to the building owner for review. Marcus's reaction was swift and predictable. That evening, he called our parents in a rage. "You won't believe what happened today," I heard him telling Mom over speakerphone when I arrived for our weekly family dinner. "Some uptight property management company is trying to push me around. They sent this ridiculous letter full of fake complaints and threats." Dad looked up from his newspaper. "What kind of complaints?" "Noise violations, unauthorized guests, complete nonsense. My neighbors are just jealous because I actually have a social life. And the smoking thing is ridiculous. I was standing in the stairwell talking on the phone, not smoking." I set my purse down and joined the conversation casually. Maybe they're just trying to maintain standards in the building. Lease agreements exist for a reason. Marcus shot me an irritated look. "Easy for you to say, Sarah. You live in some quiet suburban complex where the biggest excitement is someone forgetting to pick up their dog's waste. This is downtown Columbus. Things are different here." "Different how?" I asked, genuinely curious to hear his justification. "It's a luxury building with successful, professional tenants. We pay premium rent for premium treatment. These management companies sometimes get power-hungry and try to micromanage everything. I'm thinking about organizing the other tenants to push back against this harassment." Mom looked concerned. "Maybe you should try to work with them, Marcus. Building relationships is usually better than confrontation." "I'm not backing down from some property management bureaucrats," Marcus declared.
I've got connections in this city. My company does marketing for half the real estate firms in Columbus. One phone call, and I can find out exactly who owns this building and go straight to the top. The irony was almost too much to bear. I excused myself to help Mom in the kitchen, fighting to keep my expression neutral. "He seems really upset about this," Mom said quietly, handing me plates to set the table. "Maybe he needs to follow the rules like everyone else," I replied, keeping my voice even. Mom sighed. "You know how Marcus is. He's always been headstrong. But he's doing well in his career, and I'd hate to see something like this cause problems for him." That weekend, Marcus made good on his threat to investigate. He'd apparently spent hours researching the Metropolitan Tower's ownership, trying to track down information about the recent sale. Columbus property records were public, but the sale had been structured through my LLC, Chen Property Investments, which didn't obviously connect to me. Sunday dinner became his investigation briefing. "I found out the building sold recently," he announced, clearly pleased with his detective work. "Some investment company called Chen Property Investments bought it from the old owner. Probably some Chinese real estate syndicate looking to squeeze maximum profit out of American properties." I nearly choked on my water. Dad raised an eyebrow at Marcus's casual xenophobia, but didn't call him out directly. "The weird thing is, I can't find much information about this Chen company online. No website, no business listings, no social media presence. It's like they're trying to stay hidden, which makes me even more suspicious." "Maybe they're just private investors," I suggested mildly. "Private investors with something to hide," Marcus countered. "I'm going to keep digging. These people think they can push around American tenants, but they picked the wrong guy to mess with." Over the following week, I watched with fascination as Marcus's investigation led him down increasingly absurd rabbit holes. He'd convinced himself that Chen Property Investments was part of some international real estate conspiracy, possibly connected to money laundering or foreign government interference in American housing markets. Meanwhile, the building's new policies were having their intended effect. Several tenants who had been causing problems began following their lease agreements more carefully. Noise complaints dropped by 60% in the first month. The common areas stayed cleaner. Even the building's overall atmosphere felt more professional and respectful. But Marcus wasn't adapting. If anything, he seemed to interpret the improved environment as proof of his conspiracy theories. When the building installed new security cameras, lobby and elevators, he saw it as evidence of invasive surveillance tactics. When the parking garage lighting was upgraded for better safety, he claimed it was an attempt to monitor tenants' comings and goings. His defiance escalated. The incident reports showed he was hosting larger parties, playing music louder, and generally acting as if the rules didn't apply to him. Patricia started calling me directly about Marcus's behavior, unaware of our relationship. "Unit 412 is becoming a real problem," she reported during one of our weekly calls. "He seems to think he's untouchable. Yesterday, he told one of the maintenance staff that his connections would get anyone fired who gave him trouble." "What kind of connections?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "He claimed his company has contracts with major property management firms in the city, and he could blacklist Henderson and Associates if we didn't back off. It's obviously an empty threat, but it shows his mindset." The situation was approaching a tipping point. Marcus's behavior was affecting other tenants, creating potential legal liability, and forcing the property management company to spend disproportionate time and resources dealing with one problematic resident. More importantly, his attitude toward the building staff had become genuinely offensive. I learned from Patricia that he'd made several comments about the foreign ownership trying to exploit American tenants, and had started referring to the building's new policies as communist-style control tactics. It was time for the new owner to make a personal appearance. I scheduled the meeting for Thursday afternoon. Patricia had arranged it as a standard landlord-tenant conference to address ongoing lease violations, but she had no idea about the family connection. Marcus didn't know the building owner would be attending personally. He expected to meet with property management representatives and maybe some corporate lawyer. The meeting was set for 3 p.m. in the building's conference room on the second floor. I arrived 30 minutes early. partly to prepare, and partly because I wanted to observe Marcus's entrance. Patricia was already there with Marcus's files spread across the conference table, along with photographs of damage to common areas and a stack of incident reports. "Are you nervous about meeting him?" Patricia asked as we reviewed the documentation one final time. "Not nervous," I replied honestly. "More like curious to see how he handles accountability." At exactly 3 p.m., Marcus strutted into the conference room wearing his most expensive suit and an expression of barely contained arrogance. He'd brought a leather portfolio and his phone, which he placed deliberately on the table as if preparing to record the conversation. His confidence faltered the moment he saw me sitting at the head of the conference table. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" His eyes darted between Patricia and me, clearly confused. "I'm here for the same reason you are, Marcus, to discuss your lease violations." Patricia looked equally puzzled. "Do you two know each other?" "Marcus is my brother," I said calmly, watching his face process this information. "And I'm the owner of the Metropolitan Towers." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's mouth opened and closed several times without producing sound. His complexion shifted from confusion to disbelief to a pale realization of what this meant. "That's not possible," he finally managed. "Chen Property Investments is... You can't be. You're just a programmer." "I'm a software developer, real estate investor, and, as of 6 weeks ago, your landlord." I opened the folder in front of me, which contained copies of all his violation notices. "Patricia, could you walk us through Mr. Chen's lease infractions over the past 6 months?" Patricia, now understanding the family dynamics at play, maintained her professional demeanor as she detailed the complaints. With each violation she described, Marcus's expression grew more strained. "The noise complaints from units 408, 414, and 502, she began, consulting her notes. "Multiple instances of exceeding occupancy limits during parties, unauthorized subletting of the spare bedroom to rotating short-term guests, smoking in common areas, damage to the lobby furniture after the Valentine's Day party." "Those are all exaggerated," Marcus interrupted, his voice cracking slightly. "Sarah, you can't seriously be doing this. We're family." "Family members still need to follow lease agreements," I replied evenly, "especially when their behavior affects other tenants' quality of life." Marcus turned to Patricia with desperation creeping into his voice. "There has to be some mistake in your records. I'm a model tenant. Ask anyone in the building." Patricia slid a stack of written complaints across the table. "These are signed statements from your neighbors. Would you like me to read them aloud?" I watched Marcus scan the complaints, his face reddening as he read his neighbors' descriptions of his behavior. Mrs. Rodriguez from 408 had documented every late-night party. The young couple in 414 had kept a detailed log of noise disturbances. Even the usually tolerant graduate students in 502 had formally complained about cigarette smoke seeping into their unit through the ventilation system. It was time for the new owner to make a personal appearance. This request led to several long conversations about accessibility, workplace discrimination, and the difference between accommodation and limitation. Marcus started educating himself about disability rights and even volunteered with a local organization that helped people with disabilities develop professional skills. "I'm starting to realize how much talent gets overlooked because people make assumptions based on physical differences," he told me after his first volunteer session. "There was a woman there with spina bifida who's a brilliant graphic designer, but she's been passed over for jobs because employers assume she can't handle the workload." His growing awareness extended to his professional life as well. Marcus started advocating for accessibility improvements at his marketing firm, pushing for better website compliance and more inclusive hiring practices. When his boss initially resisted these changes, Marcus used his understanding of our family dynamics to make a compelling business case. "I told them about you," he explained during one of our weekly check-ins, "how your technical skills revolutionized property management, and how companies that overlook talent based on disability are missing out on competitive advantages." This advocacy work gave Marcus a new sense of purpose that seemed to fulfill him more than his previous focus on personal advancement. He started mentoring young professionals with disabilities, using his marketing expertise to help them develop personal brands that emphasized their capabilities rather than working around perceived limitations. The ripple effects reached our extended family as well. Uncle Robert, who had always been dismissive of my career, started asking detailed questions about my business ventures. Our cousin David, who worked in commercial construction, began consulting with me about potential real estate investments. Marcus has been telling everyone about your success, Mom confided during a private conversation. He's actually proud of you now, genuinely proud. It's like he's seeing you clearly for the first time. The relationship between Marcus and me continued evolving throughout the spring. We started meeting for lunch occasionally, not just at family events, discussing everything from market trends to accessibility technology. These conversations revealed aspects of Marcus's personality that his previous arrogance had hidden. I think I spent so much energy trying to prove I was superior that I never actually learned how to be excellent, he admitted during one of these lunches. Watching how you've built your career, methodically, strategically, without needing to put anyone else down, it's shown me a different way to approach success. By summer, Marcus had become one of my most effective business allies. His marketing insights helped me refine the positioning for my property management software, leading to 3 major new contracts with commercial real estate firms in Cincinnati and Cleveland. More importantly, his enthusiasm for accessibility advocacy had opened doors to government contracts focused on improving housing accessibility compliance. We should consider forming a formal business partnership, Marcus suggested during a strategy session for expanding into new markets. Your technical expertise, combined with my marketing and sales experience, could be really powerful. I considered this carefully. The Marcus I'd grown up with would have never been someone I'd choose as a business partner. But the Marcus sitting across from me now had demonstrated genuine change, professional competence, and a commitment to values that aligned with mine. Let's start small, I proposed. Take on one project together and see how we work as a team. That project, developing an accessibility-focused property management system for a Cincinnati housing authority, became our first official collaboration and the foundation for what would eventually become Chen & Chen Consulting Solutions. 2 years later, Chen & Chen Consulting Solutions became one of the most sought-after accessibility consulting firms in the Midwest. What started as a single project with the Cincinnati Housing Authority had evolved into a company that helped property developers, tech companies, and government agencies create truly inclusive environments. Marcus had thrown himself into the work with an intensity that surprised everyone, including me. He'd earned certifications in accessibility compliance, learned basic coding to better understand our software solutions, and become a recognized speaker at industry conferences about inclusive business practices. You know what's funny, he said during one of our quarterly business reviews, looking over our client roster that now included Fortune 500 companies and federal agencies. I used to think success meant being better than other people. Now I realize it means making things better for other people. Our partnership had challenges, of course. Marcus still had moments where his old competitive instincts surfaced, especially during high-stakes client presentations, but he'd learned to channel that energy into advocating for our clients' needs rather than promoting his own ego. The Metropolitan Towers had become something of a flagship property for our accessibility consulting work. We'd retrofitted the building with state-of-the-art accessibility features that went far beyond basic ADA compliance. Voice-activated elevators, improved lighting throughout the garage and common areas, accessible smart home technology in select units, and a comprehensive digital communication system that accommodated tenants with various disabilities. This building is now a model for what inclusive urban housing can look like, announced City Councilwoman Jennifer Walsh during the ribbon-cutting ceremony for our accessibility improvements. Chen & Chen Consulting has shown how existing properties can be transformed to serve all residents effectively.
Marcus stood beside me during the ceremony, no longer the arrogant tenant who'd once threatened to organize residents against property management policies. Several of our old neighbors approached him afterward to thank him for his role in the improvements. "Marcus, the new elevator system is incredible," said Mrs. Rodriguez, whose arthritis had made the old controls difficult to use. "And the lighting in the parking garage makes me feel so much safer walking to my car at night." "That was all Sarah's vision," Marcus replied, directing credit where it belonged. I just helped communicate the benefits to the city planning committee. But perhaps the most meaningful change wasn't in our business success or our building improvements, it was in our family relationships. Our parents, who had spent years worrying about the tension between their children, now watched with amazement as Marcus and I collaborated on everything from holiday planning to caring for our aging grandmother. I never thought I'd see you two working together like this, Dad admitted during Thanksgiving dinner. For years, I was worried that your relationship would never recover from all the childhood conflicts. We had to grow up first, Marcus said, glancing at me with a smile that held none of his old condescension. Some of us just took longer than others. Our grandmother, who'd been living in an assisted living facility, had become one of our biggest supporters. At 92, she was sharp enough to understand exactly what our company did and proud enough to brag about it to anyone who would listen. My granddaughter owns buildings, and my grandson helps make them better for people like me, she'd tell the other residents. They're partners now, working together instead of fighting like they used to. Marcus had started visiting her weekly, something he'd rarely done before our reconciliation. During one of these visits, she'd pulled him aside for a conversation that he later shared with me. She told me that she'd always known I was jealous of you, Marcus confessed as we drove back from the facility together. She said it was obvious to everyone, except me, that I felt threatened by your intelligence and determination. What did you tell her? That she was right, and that I wasted years being threatened by someone I should have been learning from. The conversation reminded me of how much our dynamic had shifted. Marcus now regularly sought my advice on career decisions, investment strategies, and even personal relationships. When he'd started dating Rebecca, a physical therapist he'd met through his volunteer work, he'd asked for my perspective on their compatibility. She works with people who have disabilities similar to yours, he'd explained. I want to make sure I'm approaching the relationship with the right mindset, not carrying any of my old, ignorant assumptions. Rebecca turned out to be perfect for Marcus, intelligent, compassionate, and completely unimpressed by his previous arrogance. She'd actually become a valuable consultant for our business, helping us understand the practical daily challenges that our building modifications needed to address. Marcus talks about you constantly, she'd told me during our first meeting. He's incredibly proud of what you've accomplished, but more than that, he's grateful for how patient you've been with his transformation. Our business expansion had brought unexpected opportunities as well. The Department of Housing and Urban Development had approached us about developing accessibility standards for federally funded housing projects nationwide. The contract would make Chen & Chen Consulting a major player in disability advocacy at the national level. 5 years ago, I thought your biggest achievement would be holding down a job at some understanding local company. Now we're being asked to help shape federal housing policy. The irony isn't lost on me. It shouldn't be ironic, I replied. This is what happens when people with disabilities are given real opportunities instead of low expectations. Our success has also opened doors for other advocacy work. Marcus had become a regular guest on local business podcasts, discussing how companies could tap into overlooked talent by improving their accessibility and inclusive hiring practices. I'd been invited to speak at tech conferences about designing software that worked for users with various disabilities. The business case for accessibility is overwhelming, Marcus would tell audiences, but the human case is even stronger. When you create environments where everyone can participate fully, you don't just help people with disabilities, you make everything better for everyone. One evening, as we finished reviewing quarterly reports in the conference room of our new office, Marcus looked around at what we'd built together. Sarah, I need to say something, and I want you to know I mean it completely. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I'm sorry it took me so long to see who you really are. I'm sorry for all the years I wasted being intimidated by your strength instead of being inspired by it. We both learned from those years, I replied. You learned to see past disability to ability. I learned that people can change if they're willing to do the work. Do you think we would have ended up here if things had been different? If I'd been supportive from the beginning? I considered this question seriously. Maybe, but I think the struggle made us both stronger. You had to confront your prejudices, and I had to prove my capabilities beyond any doubt. The business we've built comes from that depth of understanding. Marcus nodded slowly. Sometimes the long road teaches you things the short road can't. Our conversation was interrupted by a call from Patricia at Henderson and Associates. The Metropolitan Towers had just been selected as a case study for inclusive housing design by the National Association of Residential Property Managers. Our old building was going to be featured in their annual conference as an example of how accessibility improvements could enhance property values while serving diverse tenant needs. Full circle, Marcus said after I hung up the phone. From lease violations to industry recognition. Some of us just took the scenic route, I replied, and for the first time in years, we both laughed at the same joke without any trace of the old tensions. Outside our office windows, Columbus was transitioning from late afternoon to evening, the city lights beginning to twinkle in the growing dusk. Somewhere in that cityscape was the Metropolitan Towers, where this whole journey had really begun. Tomorrow, Marcus would go home to his apartment, the same unit where he'd once hosted those disruptive parties, now transformed into a peaceful space where he worked on accessibility advocacy projects in his spare time. We'd both learned that success wasn't about being better than other people, it was about becoming better versions of ourselves, and then using that growth to lift others up. The brother who'd once mocked my disability had become my strongest advocate. The sister who'd been dismissed as limited had become a leader in expanding what was possible. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen not despite our challenges, but because of them. 3 years after our HUD contract transformed Chen & Chen Consulting into a national firm, an unexpected challenge threatened everything we'd built together. Marcus had been experiencing severe headaches for months, initially dismissing them as stress from our rapid business expansion. When he finally agreed to see a doctor, the diagnosis shook our family to its core. Acoustic neuroma, Dr. Patricia Summers explained during the consultation at Ohio State's Wexner Medical Center. It's a benign brain tumor affecting the nerve that controls hearing and balance. The good news is it's not cancerous. The concerning news is its size and location. Marcus sat in the examination room chair, looking smaller than I'd seen him since that day in the Metropolitan Towers conference room. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The brother who'd spent years mocking disability was now facing the possibility of permanent hearing loss and balance issues. "What are the treatment options?" I asked, taking notes, as Marcus seemed too stunned to process the information. "Surgery is the most definitive approach, but it carries risks of facial nerve damage and complete hearing loss on the affected side. Radiation therapy might slow the tumor's growth, but won't eliminate it entirely. Without treatment, the tumor will continue growing and could eventually become life-threatening." Marcus finally found his voice. "How long do I have to decide?" "I'd recommend making a decision within the next 6 weeks. The tumor is at a size where waiting much longer could limit your options." The drive home was silent except for the occasional direction I gave to navigate Columbus traffic. Marcus stared out the passenger window, watching the city we'd both built our careers in pass by like a film reel of memories. "This is cosmic justice, isn't it?" he finally said as we pulled into my driveway. "All those years I made fun of your disability, and now I might end up with one myself." "That's not how the universe works, Marcus. Brain tumors don't develop because of moral failings. Doesn't it feel like poetic justice to you?" I turned off the engine and faced him directly. "What I feel is concerned about my brother and business partner. We need to research treatment options and find the best specialists available." Over the following weeks, Marcus's vulnerability revealed sides of his personality that even our recent closeness hadn't exposed. The confident public speaker who'd addressed federal housing committees became anxious about making phone calls. The marketing strategist who'd built our company's brand struggled to focus on simple tasks. "I can't stop thinking about what it would mean to lose my hearing," he confided during one of our strategy sessions that had devolved into a support conversation. "My whole career is built on communication, presentations, client meetings, phone conferences. How do you build a marketing business when you can't hear your clients?" "The same way you build any business," I replied. "You adapt your methods to work with your capabilities." "Easy for you to say. You've had your whole life to develop workarounds for your disability. I'm starting from scratch at 31.
His comment stung, not because it was malicious, his tone held no trace of his old condescension, but because it revealed how much he still didn't understand about the daily reality of living with a disability.
Marcus, I didn't start with some magical handbook for living with cerebral palsy. Every adaptation I've made, every workaround I've developed, I figured out through trial and error. If you need to learn those skills, you'll learn them the same way anyone does, by practicing and refusing to give up. This conversation marked a turning point in Marcus's approach to his diagnosis. Instead of wallowing in anxiety about hypothetical limitations, he started researching how successful professionals managed careers with hearing impairments. He reached out to the disability advocacy network he'd built through our business, asking for practical advice rather than sympathy. I talked to Janet Morrison today, he reported after one of these conversations. Janet was a federal contracting officer we'd worked with who had profound hearing loss. She uses a combination of lip reading, real-time captioning technology, and strategic meeting management to stay effective in her role. She said the key is being proactive about communication needs rather than reactive. Marcus threw himself into learning about assistive technology with the same intensity he'd once applied to building his marketing expertise. He practiced using voice-to-text software, experimented with hearing loop systems, and even started learning basic American Sign Language. If I'm going to do this, I want to do it right, he explained as he showed me the ASL vocabulary cards he'd been studying. I don't want to be the business partner who becomes a burden because he didn't prepare properly. Rebecca proved to be an invaluable support system during this period. Her background in physical therapy gave her practical knowledge about adapting to new physical realities, and her relationship with Marcus provided the emotional stability he needed to make difficult decisions. She's been incredible, Marcus told me after Rebecca had spent an evening helping him practice lip-reading techniques. I keep waiting for her to decide this is too much trouble, but she's treating it like just another challenge to solve together. The surgical consultation with Dr. Michael Torres at Cleveland Clinic provided more detailed options than we'd initially understood. The tumor's specific location meant that a newer, less invasive approach called gamma knife radiosurgery could potentially control its growth while preserving more of Marcus's hearing. The procedure uses precisely targeted radiation beams to stop tumor growth, Dr. Torres explained, showing us detailed brain scans on his computer monitor. Recovery time is much shorter than traditional surgery, and the risk of immediate hearing loss is significantly lower. However, hearing loss could still develop gradually over time. What percentage of patients maintain functional hearing after this procedure? Marcus asked, taking detailed notes that I recognized as his coping mechanism for anxiety. Approximately 70% maintain serviceable hearing at the 5-year mark. Those who do experience hearing loss usually see it develop slowly enough to adapt their communication strategies progressively. Marcus scheduled the gamma knife procedure for the following month, giving us time to prepare both personally and professionally for his recovery period. Our business had grown to include 8 full-time employees, which meant Marcus could take the time he needed without compromising our client commitments. I want to be transparent with our team about what's happening, Marcus decided during a staff meeting preparation session. If I'm going to be advocating for workplace disability inclusion, I need to model what that looks like when it's my own situation. His announcement to our employees demonstrated how completely his perspective on disability had evolved. Instead of treating his diagnosis as a private medical issue, he framed it as an opportunity for our company to demonstrate the inclusive practices we promoted to clients. Some of you might be wondering how this affects our business operations, Marcus told the assembled team. The answer is that it doesn't change our mission or capabilities, it just gives us even more authentic insight into the challenges our clients face when implementing accessibility initiatives. Our office manager, David Kim, raised his hand. What accommodations do you anticipate needing? We should make sure our meeting rooms and communication systems are set up properly. This question led to a comprehensive review of our own workplace accessibility that revealed gaps we hadn't noticed. Our conference room's acoustics were poor for anyone with hearing difficulties. Our presentation software didn't automatically generate captions. Even our open office layout, which we thought was collaborative, created background noise that could interfere with assistive hearing devices. We're supposed to be accessibility experts, Marcus said with a rueful laugh as we surveyed our newly identified shortcomings. Apparently, we still have some learning to do about practicing what we preach.
The irony became a teaching moment rather than a source of embarrassment. Marcus documented his pre-surgery workplace assessment process and turned it into a case study for our clients about conducting authentic accessibility audits. The best accessibility consultants are the ones who understand these challenges personally, he wrote in a blog post that gained significant attention in industry publications. Whether that personal understanding comes from lived experience with disability or from facing new accessibility needs, the key is approaching these challenges with humility and genuine commitment to solutions. The day before his procedure, Marcus and I sat in our office after everyone else had gone home, reviewing contingency plans and client transition protocols.
Sarah, I need you to know something, he said, closing his laptop and giving me his full attention. If this procedure doesn't go well, if I end up with significant hearing loss or other complications, I don't want you to feel obligated to carry me as a business partner. Marcus, let me finish. You built this company's foundation with your technical expertise and vision. I contributed marketing and business development, but those skills can be replaced. Your capabilities can't be. If I become more of a liability than an asset, I want you to make whatever business decisions are best for the company. I studied his face, looking for traces of his old self-pity or dramatic tendencies, but found only genuine concern for our shared enterprise. Here's what I know about you, Marcus. You've spent the last 4 years proving that you can adapt, learn, and contribute in ways I never expected. If this procedure changes your capabilities, you'll figure out how to be effective with your new reality. That's not optimism. That's evidence-based prediction. And if I can't, if the learning curve is too steep or the adaptations don't work, then we'll solve those problems when we encounter them, the same way we've solved every other challenge we faced. But I'm not planning for your failure because I don't expect it. The next morning, as Marcus was wheeled into the Gamma Knife suite at Cleveland Clinic, I realized that our roles had reversed completely from that confrontation in the Metropolitan Towers conference room. This time, I was the one providing unwavering support to my brother as he faced an uncertain future. The Gamma Knife procedure took 4 hours. I spent most of that time in the Cleveland Clinic's family waiting area, fielding updates from Rebecca, our parents, and our business team. What I didn't expect was the flood of messages from clients, colleagues, and even competitors who had heard about Marcus's surgery through industry networks. "Sarah, this is Amanda Richardson from Accessible Futures," one voicemail began. Amanda was the CEO of a competing consulting firm in Chicago. "I just wanted you to know that our entire team is thinking of Marcus today. He's been such a strong voice for authentic disability advocacy. The industry needs people like him." By the time Dr. Torres emerged to give us the initial results, my phone had logged over 30 similar messages from people whose lives Marcus had impacted through his transformation and advocacy work. "The procedure went exactly as planned," Dr. Torres reported, still wearing his surgical scrubs. "We were able to target the tumor precisely without affecting surrounding tissue. Marcus is awake and responsive, and his initial hearing tests show no immediate changes." "What happens now?" Rebecca asked, gripping my hand as we processed the good news. "Recovery for a Gamma Knife is much simpler than traditional surgery. He'll likely have some fatigue for the next few days, but he should be able to return to normal activities within a week. We'll monitor the tumor's response to treatment over the next 6 months to a year." When we finally saw Marcus in recovery, he looked exhausted but relieved. The first thing he did was ask Rebecca to whisper something in his left ear, the side affected by the tumor. "I can hear you," he said with a smile that transformed his entire face. "Maybe not perfectly, but I can definitely hear you." The weeks following Marcus's procedure became an unexpected period of growth for our entire company. His temporary hearing sensitivity forced us to implement the accessibility improvements we'd identified in our pre-surgery audit. Real-time captioning became standard in all meetings. Our presentation templates automatically included visual descriptions of charts and graphs. Even our casual office conversations became more inclusive, as everyone learned to face each other when speaking. "This is actually making us better consultants," observed Jennifer Walsh, our newest accessibility specialist.
We're not just recommending accommodations anymore, we're living in them. Marcus returned to work gradually, starting with written correspondence and video calls before moving back to in-person client meetings. His experience with assistive technology during recovery gave him insights that enhanced our consulting services in unexpected ways. I never understood how exhausting it could be to constantly advocate for your communication needs, he told me after his first week back. Even with supportive colleagues, the mental energy required to ensure you're included in every conversation is significant. This personal insight led to one of our most innovative service offerings, inclusion energy audits, that helped organizations understand the hidden costs their employees with disabilities were absorbing just to participate fully in workplace activities. We're not just measuring physical accessibility anymore, Marcus explained to a prospective client. We're measuring the cognitive and emotional labor required for equal participation. When someone has to constantly request accommodations or translate inaccessible information, they're using energy that could be directed toward productivity and innovation. 6 months after his surgery, Marcus's latest brain scan showed the tumor had stopped growing and was actually beginning to shrink. His hearing had stabilized at about 90% of his pre-diagnosed levels, enough to function normally with minimal accommodations. Dr. Torres says the prognosis is excellent, he reported during our monthly business review. Annual monitoring scans, but no restrictions on activities or major concerns about progression. Later that evening, as Marcus and I reviewed our consulting calendar for the upcoming quarter, I noticed we had bookings extending into the next year, a level of demand that would have seemed impossible when we were first starting out. Sarah, Marcus said, closing his laptop and looking around our office with satisfaction, do you ever think about what you'd tell your younger self if you could go back to those family dinners when I was being such an ass? I'd probably tell her to be patient, that the brother who couldn't see past her disability would eventually become her strongest advocate, that the person who predicted she'd never amount to anything would help her build something bigger than either of them imagined possible. And I'd tell my younger self to listen more and assume less, that the sister I was dismissing as limited was actually the most capable person I knew. Marcus paused, then added with a grin, though I might also warn myself about the property management situation. That was a pretty spectacular humbling. Some lessons can't be taught, I replied. They have to be experienced. Outside our office windows, Columbus was settling into another evening. Somewhere in the city, the metropolitan towers stood as a testament to how people and places could be transformed when someone cared enough to do the work. Our story had started with disability being seen as a barrier and ended with it being recognized as a pathway to innovation and understanding. The brother who once mocked my cerebral palsy had become a national advocate for disability inclusion. The sister, who was supposed to have limited potential, had built a company that was changing how America thought about accessibility and accommodation. Sometimes, the most powerful transformations begin with the most painful truths. And sometimes, if you're patient enough and brave enough to do the work, those truths can become the foundation for something beautiful. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.